the Waco City Council on November 15th, 2022 to order at 3:02 p.m. Please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. We provide an opportunity for the public to address the City Council on any agenda item or during the hearing of visitors portion of the agenda. On items other than public hearings, speakers will be allotted 1 3-minute presentation regardless of the number of agenda items the speaker wishes to address. If you're here to speak and have not filled out a registration card, please see the City Secretary staff at the registration table outside the auditorium to provide registration information so that staff can contact you if necessary. If you have handouts, please let us know at the beginning of your presentation and staff will distribute those to council. If you're unable to approach the podium due to physical limitations, a microphone is available to be brought to you. Is there anyone present who would like to speak on a work session item? Seeing no one has registered to speak, we will now recess the regular session and convene a work session with a report from the city manager.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Welcome to the Multipurpose Center this afternoon. I do have a couple of changes in the council agenda I wanted to highlight real briefly. We're going to remove Resolution 875 from the agenda this evening. We do anticipate bringing that back at a future date. It involved a property acquisition.
I want the light back on.
Might need that.
Thank you.
All right. And then our second change is the ordinances. We only have 2 on the agenda today, but they are misnumbered. So they're labeled on your agenda as 890, 891, but those will actually be heard as 899 and 900. So you're hitting your 900 agenda item this year. So congrats on that. We'll do our best to get you to 1,000.
Thank you.
Yeah, only a couple more opportunities. And then I've got 3 updates and recognitions I wanted to provide. The first one, you might notice my glasses getting a little foggy on because it's a little bittersweet. Kelly Holacek, our Director of General Services, has announced her resignation after 17 years with the City of Waco, and her last day is going to be December 2nd. Kelly is the epitome of being a team player in this organization, and she's been that throughout her tenure. I wouldn't be the only manager to say that, I don't think. She oversees purchasing, fleet, and facilities, and she's gotten to really drive a number of projects forward. She was a part of the team that built the Asian Forest exhibit that brought orangutans to the zoo. She's been just a key team member when we took over the shelter and made major changes there. She's also been involved in a lot of renovations and expansions, including the Convention Center, the 25th Street Theater into Fire Station 6, as well as everyone's latest and greatest project, the police department window replacement. You know, but all that said, projects are one thing, but you know, the heart of a person is what we'll miss the most about Kelly. She loves Waco. She loves her team members, and we know she'll take that same attitude with her as she continues her career. So if you don't mind giving her a round of applause.
Kelly, we're going to miss you so much. And it's been such an honor to get to work alongside you on so many of these projects and see them come to be. And just thank you from this community. The work you've done is so meaningful to our town. And I have appreciated your wisdom and competency and kindness in multiple meetings that we've been a part of. And I know the future is going to be bright for you, and know you'll be very missed.
All right, our second employee recognition item, we're gonna go more upbeat, at least from the city's perspective. I think Kelly's upbeat about the change, by the way. She's gonna have a great role to play at her new city. But our second update is an update on Employee Appreciation Day. I think we've got some images that are gonna pop here in a minute. We did hold that on November 3rd at Brazos Park East. I heard from several employees during the afternoon about how much they appreciated the council's work this year to ensure we have top-notch benefits and that we're staying on top of compensation challenges. It really meant a lot to people that you care about our staff so much as a council. We had upwards of about 1,000 employees that made the event, some that stayed and played yard games and enjoyed food from local restaurants and food trucks, some that took part in the to-go aisles, the drive-through aisles. And what was neat, I thought, from a branding perspective, we had banners up at the event that look like the ones that are on your screen here that tell about the city as an employer. And then every to-go bag also had a little postcard with all the changes that the council approved related to longevity pay and compensation and health benefits, so that we're continuing to repeat how important our individuals are to make the city work. I do want to thank all the team members that assisted in Employee Appreciation Day. It's not easy to throw an event like that together. This year's committee, it included team members from Parks, Human Resources, Communications, General Services, Fiscal Services, and Solid Waste. And I don't know if any of our committee members are here, but I'm going to call their names. If you're on the committee, please stand. Megan Davis, Jessica Maxwell, Cameron Wolf, Annalisa Taggart, Jose Zuniga. I thought Jose might be here. Sherry Martin, Lisa Willis, Ashley Millard, and Wendy Loutherback. They did a phenomenal job of bringing that event home. And it also took a lot of staff members from police, fire, and Parks and Rec. Want to give a special call out to the council members that made it out. I know the staff appreciates getting to visit with you and hear from you on Employee Appreciation Day. Lastly, I am going to make some people stand up this time, because I see some veterans in the audience. Lastly, I wanted to, last week was Veterans Day, November 11th, I believe. And we celebrated, who said, oh gosh, was that Frank? Oh,
It's a quality meme right
oh,
there.
well done. Yeah, I didn't.
It's an edited photo.
I did not preview the pictures. Thanks. Those are great. No, November 11th was Veterans Day. That is not from the Veterans Day celebration. Now let's pull that back up for a second. That is from Employee Appreciation Day. And Frank's got his eye on the mayor. I think he's worried that the mayor's stealing that cart. Pretty sure that's what's going on
Edited
here.
photo.
Well, pretty sure that's what's going on there. But no, we had a great time.
Took it on to the kids.
Last week was a Veterans Day, and if the council remembers, and probably the public's aware too, 2 years ago, the city council authorized Veterans Day as a city holiday. You added it to our list of holidays that we take off, and in recognition of the hard work that our staff does, and also in recognition of giving our staff a time which they can reflect on the impact of veterans in our community. I did want to recognize the city really appreciates our veterans. We have about 150 staff members that are veterans, but in 19 of our 26 departments are represented. And I think we're joined by a few here today. So I'd ask for any veterans to stand and be acknowledged.
Thank you for your service to our country. It's something that we don't take lightly. So honored by your sacrifice and your family's sacrifices.
Council, we have 10 public hearings on the agenda today. Those are going to get covered by Clint Peters potentially during the work session, time permitting. We kind of loaded up on the work session, so we may have to have Clint give us the overview in the business session. We're going to play that by ear as the afternoon rolls on. We have 28 resolutions, and I'm going to take a moment just to highlight 2 of them that I think are worthy of a brief highlight. The first one is Resolution 886, which involves the purchase of 3 new fire apparatus, including replacing 2 pumpers that are currently 15 and 13 years old. And like teenagers, they do become pretty difficult when they get to be that age. As the father of a 14 and 12-year-old, I can say that. And the third one's going to be used at our future site. at Fire Station 15 on Ritchie Road. We do anticipate, the agenda item noted that we anticipate delivery in 12 to 14 months. I would say that there's a chance we don't get them for 18 months. There are some indications that we're getting that supply chain may take us a little farther out. So we're looking at 12 to 18 months is what I would say. And really just appreciate, this is kind of a continuation of the council's efforts to create a safe community and really continue a multi-year effort to reduce the average age of our fire apparatus. This comes on the heels of adding 7 last year. That'll make 10 fire trucks replaced and or added in 2 fiscal years, which is quite a significant move. The second resolution I wanted to highlight is 893, which provides $100,000 in supplemental funding to the Union Pacific Railroad, UPRR, to support additional design services related to the creation of a quiet zone at 10 intersections throughout Waco from Peach to 13th. Staff and our design engineer are currently estimating completion of the quiet zone in April 2024. Of course, that assumes really good cooperation from Union Pacific. With that, Mayor, that completes my report. I'll take any questions that you or the council has.
Any questions?
Just a question on 891. If we could address that just a little bit, it says, for me to feel comfortable, it says District 1 and 2, but can we talk a little bit about what the purpose and special services for the tributary on the Primrose Creek? If somebody could speak to that for me.
Sure, I'm going to ask Amy Brillarly Highland to step up. There she is. Amy, do you mind stepping up to the podium and giving a response on that one?
Amy Berlarley Highland, Director of Public Works. The purpose of that study is to look at possibilities for mitigating flooding along Primrose Creek because we have added significant area to the 100-year floodplain when we did that study. So it's also looking in the area where we're doing those bridges as well.
Thank you. I know I get a lot of calls from residents and folks that live around the Primrose Creek with all of that floods. So I was just wanted to give them some kind of relief or some kind of answers next time they call me. And it has been raining here, thank God, for a while. But I just needed a little more clarification on what I need to tell my folks when they call me about the flooding and what it causes.
Yeah, we're going to be looking for solutions to the issues so that we can plan for projects into the future to mitigate.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Not that the consent agenda includes resolutions 2022-871 through 898, with the exceptions of 880 and 889, which have been pulled because an affidavit of substantial interest has been filed, 875, which has been pulled altogether. The next item on the agenda are work session items 2022-854 through 858. Bradley, would you please introduce the first work session?
Sure, Mayor. Our first one is a discussion concerning the process of filling the District 4 vacancy. And I'm going to invite City Secretary Michelle Hicks. Can somebody cue up the walk-up music for Michelle? Now, this is Michelle Hicks. We've been kind of joking a little bit about this. Hopefully, it's been encouraging to her. I told her how bad my first presentation of the council went, that she couldn't do worse than that. So there's always a low bar set by me.
No.
And she's gonna do amazing. And take it away, Michelle.
Good evening, Mayor Council. Today I will be going over the process to fill the vacant council seat.
Any questions?
Thank you,
Perfectly clear to me.
I know staff is, I know staff is doing a good job of configuring this space, although I think it is probably in its best and highest use for an elementary school pageant. And so I appreciate y'all's good work in configuring it here.
Many people that want to be appointed as their work for District 2, but we had 28 folks that wanted this position, so hopefully there'll be that many for District 2.
This moment, Councilmember Borderoud's infamous stand-up act. We'll let him do some stand-up.
Can you do 5 minutes?
Do you have 5 minutes?
I've got about 5 hot minutes, mostly about airline travel.
So I will review the city's charter requirements, the eligibility requirements to be appointed, the appointment process and timeline, and the notice that will be provided to the public. The Waco City Charter provides that vacancies shall be filled by a majority vote of the remaining members for the unexpired term or until the next general election. For a resignation to be official, it must be in writing and received by the mayor or city secretary. Councilmember Palmer's resignation was received by the mayor on October 28th and effective November 4th, which created the vacancy for District 4. To be eligible for an appointment, a resident must meet specific requirements. They must be a U.S. citizen, the age of 21, have not been totally or partially mentally incapacitated, have not been convicted of a felony, has resided within the state for 12 months and the city of Waco for 12 months. District 6, you have to live in District 4 for at least 6 months and be a registered voter for at least 12 months. So the first day to file for an application for the District 4 vacancy will be Monday, November 21st. The applications will be located on the city's website under the city council page. Applications are to be filed with the city secretary's office as well as through email. And that's in accordance to House Bill 3107. Our office hours to apply will be Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. The last day to file for an application will be Tuesday, January the 3rd. Applications must be received by 5 p.m. After the applications have been received and reviewed, interviews will be held on January the 10th, and the appointment process will begin or will be during the January 17th council meeting. The city election will be held May 6th, 2023. The election will include districts 2, 4, and 5. The resident that is appointed at the January 17th meeting will have to file for a place on the ballot if they choose to fill the term, the full term for District 4. The first day to file for the May election will be January the 18th, and the last day to submit your application will be February the 17th. And again, applications have to be received by 5 p.m. The next steps will be to send out a press release on November the 6th with the timeline outlining the application process. We will use the city's news channel, publish in the Waco Trib, post on the city's website, place it on the social media outlets, and provide information to the neighborhood engagement offices. Any questions?
Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but it seemed pretty clear. Thanks for the presentation. Perfect.
Flawless.
Best first presentation I've ever seen. Good job.
I have a question. How did you get on the QR code a dinosaur in there? Man, that was cool. Did y'all see that? Back me up
I
one
saw
slide.
that. I thought that was cute.
Yeah.
My 4-year-old son will love that very much.
Okay, don't worry about it, Ryan. Ryan's doing great over there. DJ Ryan Sweat. No, there's a dinosaur in the QR code. I didn't know you could make little
I
shaped
enjoyed
items.
that little dinosaur.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. This is a highlight of my day. Our second work session, council, is a discussion of an update on Brazos Riverfront development, which we've got a number of team members here for this portion. I'll invite team members from Baylor and Catalyst, as well as Paul Kane, Assistant City Manager, up to the table for, he'll do the intro on this one. And I think we're going to hear from several others, experts, certainly bigger experts than Paul. So Paul will start and then we'll work from there.
Great. Thank you, Bradley, for that introduction. Mayor and council, we're about 11 months since we last had a big kickoff of this project last December. I recall in the council chambers, we had members of the TIF board and county commissioners and representatives from Baylor and Catalyst there in the council chambers to kick off this discussion and this really significant development for the city of Waco. And so we want to come to you today and give you some updates on where we are, talk about some recommended changes. And so we have 3 of us here today. As Bradley mentioned, we have Patrick Carley, who's Associate Vice President of Facilities at Baylor. Of course, myself and Paris Rutherford, Principal in Campus Development. And I just noticed that our initials are CCR. So I guess back to breaking the song. Maybe Proud Mary, something like that.
Yeah, I'm for it.
All right. Next slide. Can I use it quickly? Do that. All right. So first off, we'll have Pat take us through just an update on the pavilion. For those of you who have been passing, you see it's already going up now, and that's really exciting to see. I'll talk about the hotel garage some, and then Harris will give us an update from the Catalyst perspective, and then I'll wrap up with some timeline information and also cover the on the MS part. That I'll pass this down to Pat. Start us off with an update on the
Good afternoon, council members. Appreciate it. Pat Carley from Baylor University. It's great to be here and really appreciate your support over the last many months and years for this project, because we literally and figuratively would not be where we are today without your support for this project. I've just got 5 slides giving you an update on where we are in upcoming few months and year in the project. So those few sentences you see there on the slide come straight out of the master development signed between the city and Baylor University back in March of this year. And it's very important, and we recognize the importance of this project, that it's a joint use project and the benefit of the city. Another thing to note on this slide is our architect and contractor, AECOM, and Austin Commercial, respectively, are the architect and the contractor that the city is using as well. Lots of efficiencies gained there, having the same team on projects that are adjacent. Just a little bit about the pavilion. We're very excited about it. As I said, it's going to hold approximately 7,500 spectators, of which about 500 of those will be standing room only. It's going to have some great features that our current Barrel Center, which houses basketball, currently does not have, to include premium club spaces, which will provide courtside and sideline club for pregame and halftime use, and for other events that can be hosted. It will have a full catering kitchen and cooking capability to provide not only for the game, but for the other things. Multiple locker rooms, a large video scoreboard. You can see there, approximately 2,000 square feet each. And as noted on the bottom right corner, we're excited about the possibilities. few of the behind the scenes aspects of the project as part of the development center, which will be out of the public's eye, so to speak. We'll have offices for both the men's and women's basketball teams, for coaches and administrative staffs. We'll provide a practice gym, locker room, meeting space, team equipment, and storage areas for both the men's and the women's team, respectively. And there'll also be shared spaces for the two teams for strength and conditioning, training and treatment, and nutrition. Here's a few photos of what has gone on over the past month. And if you've driven by in the past day or two, these are kind of out of date already. These were just taken in October. So that upper left picture is wrapping up the auger cast piles last month, which we had 1,297 of them, so just shy of 1,300 auger cast piles went down into the site. And on the right there, you can see the beginning of the steel erection, which started last month. We'll go through March of 5 months or so. Looking out through project completion, just a few more milestone dates I'll highlight here that are on the chart as well. So starting in December of this year, going through August of 23, we'll be working on exterior skin and roof systems. Spring of 23 through spring of 24 timeframe will be the interior work, MEPF, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection and detection systems. We are projecting early completion in January of 2024 of the arena portion only. The goal is to have the Big 12 conference basketball games for both men and women in the 23-24 season take place in our new pavilion. That's an aggressive target, but we're currently on track to do it. And then final completion is scheduled for the 31st of July of 2024, with move-in taking place the following month in August. So once again, I want to thank the City Council for your support for this project. Without you, it couldn't happen. And I also want to thank many team members on Bradley Ford's team for their continued partnership and collaboration with us, for their permitting, plan reviews, site walks, etc. Because without their can-do attitude and their partnership, thank you very much, Bradley Ford's team. Any questions or comments?
Any questions?
I just have a comment, Patrick. We really appreciate the Baylor and the relationship that the city and Baylor have. And this is such an exciting project. This is like a huge once every 100 years deal. And it's got a lot of different parts to it, as we're about to find out here, or we already know, but there's a lot of moving parts to this thing. And just the Baylor relationship is so important. It's fun to see that, all that going on out there in the pavilion, and dream on these pictures are beautiful. I had some folks visiting, some investment banker friends visiting from Minnesota last week, and we had lunch at the Baylor Club, and we're kind of looking over the cranes and everything going on down there, and just very impressive that this is actually the dreams coming true here. And I appreciate everything that Baylor's doing and how we're all working together to get this thing done. And staff also, this takes there's a lot of moving parts as well. Again, we'll be talking about here, but Patrick, I appreciate Baylor, and I appreciate this pavilion. It's going to be fantastic.
Great, thank you.
Patrick, I'll just say again to echo what Councilmember Holmes said. Appreciate you and your team so much. Appreciate Mr. McNair. I see Jason Cook here tonight, President Livingstone, and Brett Dalton, and similarly as I appreciate your comments about the can-do attitude of our city team. That's certainly what I believe is representative of our entire staff and consistent with their value set. And so I'm glad that you've experienced that as well. And we just relay the same. So grateful for the partnership that has been forged through this or strengthened through this, and certainly believe that we got a lot of good team members coming together to make sure that this is first in class. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Excited about this project. I have some company here from Palm Springs, California. They couldn't believe all the changes and all the construction that's going on in Waco, and they said, Alice, thank you for that. I said, no, it's not me. It's a lot of us.
Mhm.
And I also appreciate the can-do attitude that the comments that you made about our staff. The staff is just as excited as we as council members are when we go out into the community and talk about what's going on. That I was kind of, when we first started this, I said, I'm not going to believe it till I actually see all the work being, and I've actually seen the work going on, and I've got real excited about going and looking at all the work done, and also because it happens to be in District 2.
Thank you.
Thank you, council. And from staff's perspective, we certainly share that sentiment. I think working with the Baylor team, it's been an awesome experience for us. A lot of good communication back and forth. A lot of making sure we're all on the same page as we move through this. Certainly the Catalyst team is part of that as well. So there's a lot of coordination that goes into this, and the details, the day-to-day details of that vertical construction that you're seeing now. There's a lot of work that goes into that to make that happen. So we're grateful for the team that is working on this together, Baylor and Catalyst, but also that extends to our contractual support at AECom in Austin. My component of the presentation today is to talk a little bit about the design work that's been going on and talk to you about some changes that we're recommending. So looking at the pavilion and the parking garage and the hotel, this is a slide from AECom that shows one of the renderings of the project. A little background, way back when this conversation first started, Baylor was looking, of course, at the pavilion with the garage only concept, and the city proposed a hotel concept as well. And so we began working in that direction. That was part of the agreements that were ultimately approved in March of this year. The city retained AECom that same day back in December that I talked about earlier. When we started this project off, we retained AECom again, as Pat mentioned, looking for that synchronicity of design and site layout and all those kinds of things, getting the same firm involved. From an architectural standpoint, it seemed to make a lot of sense to us, and I think council proving that really showed the city's interest in coordinating that project all the way through. In January of 2022, we issued an RFI for hotel developers. We received a number of proposals. Probably the top two were AJC, Graduate Hotels, and then SRH that proposed Western Hotel. So that project is part of our agreements with Baylor. It's a joint decision between the city and Baylor on who that hotel will be. We've primarily over the last few months been having some exploratory discussions with AJC and working through a lot of different concepts of design and marketing, those kinds of things. And as we begun to focus on the design side, the city selected CMA as a construction manager at risk, or CMAR, also commercial again, the contractor for the pavilion to build the garage. Again, trying to keep the same team together. And since then, we've been having weekly meetings, 19. Some issues have come up that we want to bring to your attention today. Those of us who've been in some of these weekly meetings, we see it daily, and as things change, I know you're seeing this for the first time, but there's really some key issues that have kind of risen to the top that we feel like we need to address with regard to the hotel and the parking garage complex. Those 4 points are the architecture of massing on the site, what that looks like, just designing the building itself and the challenges there. Of course, economics and budget always come into play. And then some of the hotel timeline challenges that the force you to challenge this concept of hotel or parking garage. And you see here just some of the work that's been done. AECom has been doing different computer renderings, even looking at what sunlight is going to look like at different heights and those kinds of things. So a lot of work's been going on here. When I mentioned architectural massing, the first bullet point here, I'm going to try to show you some of these scales we've been looking at. So this top image here shows the pavilion, which is right about 90 feet. And then the Clifton Robinson Tower next door at about 100 feet. The Catalyst development will be around 65 feet or so across Clay. And then we've looked at a couple of different hotel models you see here. And in these images, you see that the first one is kind of a C-shaped kind of hotel sitting on top of the garage, with the garage being about 118 feet, and the hotel extending up to around 176 feet with another 15 feet above that. So that was one concept we're looking at. The other one's even taller. Again, the garage kind of squeezes down to 118 feet. The lobby is in the bottom for the hotels. In both scenarios, the lobby is on the bottom. This is more of a tower hotel concept, and this goes up to about 243 feet. So this is the Alico building here. So it gives you some perspective of what this would look like around the site. So as we began to have this discussion, we were looking at a 555 space garage. 435 is our contract with Baylor, another 120 for the hotel, and that puts us in this area here around 180 feet. Again, remember the pavilion is 90 feet or so. So the additional floors were pushing us almost 2 times the height of the pavilion. Of course, the pavilion is the centerpiece of the property and to anchor the development. So as you think of this height growing and growing and growing next door, you eventually end up having a pavilion sitting in a canyon of buildings, which is not something that the city nor Baylor wanted to see in terms of what that site looked like. So that became a concern for us as we moved through this. And it became a more and more of a critical issue as we started looking at building design. So the concept here that we're trying to work through is to build a garage that could ultimately support a hotel at some point in the future on top of it. So as you think about that, certainly foundation's key to that. But then you think about vertical circulation, freight, how things are going to move up and down inside the building, utility support space. You then also have a restriction in the ground floor because you have to build the lobby and everything on the ground floor, and then move people up to the rooms above 7 to 8 stories higher than the lobby. So all of these things, and you start thinking about how to design this for a future hotel. You can see in the image at right, all of the pink area is hotel only space. And then the blue is some of the vertical movement because you have to be able to move people up and down through the space, fire code issues, ability to load, unload, go in fast. All of those things you have to start designing in the garage, whether or not the hotel ever comes. But planning for the hotel, these have to be integral parts of that design. The other thing that we started looking at is we looked at the height of the buildings, where you're looking at buildings 243 or higher, maybe. Thinking about the facade screening of that space and what that looks like and the scale of that. It's hard to do from an architectural standpoint. So all those things kind of came into place, and one of the architects summed it up pretty well. We're essentially building a Manhattan or LA type hotel in the Waco market. So there's some compatibility issues there. Economics and budget is always important. We were pushing around $55,000 per space in the garage. Just for comparison, the space the city's buying at Catalyst are about $28,000. Part of that is inflated a little bit by the retail space bottom, but it gives you some sense of where these costs are going. A lot of that is because of the design issues and the sunk costs, things you have to do in the foundation and in the vertical spacing of the garage to allow for it. Costs would be higher than building on dirt. That's logical. I think all of us can understand that. The increased operational expense is another element of that. Moving materials up and down, people up and down, all those kinds of things is additional cost. And then you start wondering about in the Waco market, can the market absorb the additional costs we have to have? So all of these things began to go through our minds as we're thinking through this, and there's some realities. You know, there may never be a hotel built on that site, the top of the garage. Could we get a deal done with the hotel developer? At what cost could we get it done? The subsidy that they might need. And even in the time that this presentation has been put together, for those of you who follow the real estate market, you know that money's getting tighter and tighter, and hotel money in particular is changing. So whether or not there would be a hotel built on top of a garage like that, it's kind of format and expecting our mind, which understanding, you know, what is our financial interest, capability, or even the political will of the city or Baylor to put more money into the deal to make a hotel happen. The last element was this hotel timeline challenges that I mentioned. If the developer was identified today, we had an agreement, we're ready to roll. We're looking at a design window of about 6 to 12 months, 20 months for construction. So we're looking at about 32 months to be complete. Well, that gets us past that July 24 date that I was talking about earlier. So you could have construction going on anywhere from 7 months to 13 months after the pavilion opened. You can imagine what that does to the whole field, the whole area. We've got a crane sitting in the middle of the plaza, essentially shutting that down while the hotel's being built. All of these things, as we kind of look at each one of them individually, it added up to us that we needed to think about making a change. So we are recommending today that we pivot away from the idea of building a hotel atop the garage. What we're recommending today is going with just a garage with retail space only. The height would be near the pavilion. We're thinking around 100 feet for the garage. We think we might be able to drop that a little more, but we'll see. The pavilion height's 90, as I talked about earlier. This helps us a great deal with the building design and construction. It's simple, more efficient. It also allows us to add more parking spaces because some of the spaces in the garage you needed to go vertical for a hotel, you can now convert back to parking, which is good. The facade symmetry will help us a lot as well. It'll be shorter, easier to plan what that looks like, and so the scale of it. And we believe we can stay on the critical path. And the critical path is to have parking spaces available by January 24th. That date is creeping up on us. And what we're looking at now is having essentially the spaces ready to park, but the facade and the finish out will come later, closer to that July 24 date. From the economics and budget side of things, eliminating the hotel obviously saves money, minimizes those sunk costs I talked about earlier. We'll be able to increase parking from 600 spaces, what we're talking about with you in December, to 700 spaces. And that's, we think it'll cost us $19 million. We're still working through that on the garage. We think that's about right where we'll be for those 450 spaces. We've worked out a deal to be papered with Catalyst to add an additional number of spaces to the 165 that we're purchasing from them. And so on both the garage side and next door, we'll be able to park 700 cars for events at the location, which is after we had that December meeting. There was a lot of commentary, and you probably heard it and talked to folks in the community concerned about parking for the pavilion. We think those 100 spaces will be important. It does eliminate some risk. Don't have to worry about the hotel in the future and the alignment of hotel design with the parking design. It does eliminate that disruption to the plaza that well. And if there's a a corporate university hotel needed in the community, that's still in play. If that wanted to happen at some point in time, that can still happen. And Catalyst is going to talk about some work that they're doing. We feel like this is the best way to go. We feel like it's the most responsible approach to take at this point. We just have gotten to where we can't continue on the path we're on and sinking costs into a garage or a future hotel that won't look good on the side. It's going to cost a lot of money to build and doesn't really complement the development as it should. You can imagine if the pavilion at 90 feet, you have a garage hotel pushing 180. It doesn't look right. So that's where we are in terms of recommendation. I have a couple of pictures in here, and I don't want you or anyone to think that this is the way it's going to look, but architecturally, the purpose of these slides is to show you what creative-minded folks have done with garage screening. And these are just some examples, some nighttime examples. This is one from Kansas City. It's actually around the library, and they turned outside of the library. So these are amazing designs, but just the intent here is to show you the creativity that can go into this from a design and from a screening standpoint. Paris and I were visiting earlier today, and SMU's does really neat stuff on their campus. So there's lots of examples we can look to around the state, around the country, that can provide the kind of stuff. This is another one that's out in Columbus, actually, around an arena, and you can see where they have large billboards that they cover part of the parking area here next to their arena. We're envisioning, an upgrade from this, but video boards and those kinds of things that really complement the work that's being done by Baylor Plaza that help to live that as an activity space that brings people down there to hang out, to watch basketball games, to a concert, or just come out on a Friday night, go to a restaurant, having a good meal, and then hang out in the plaza and listen to music. we're looking at some activity there that we think will really help complement the work that Baylor's doing. So to summarize my slides for now, we do recommend pivoting to a garage retail concept only. We've spent a lot of time engaging with the Baylor team over the last few weeks, and don't want to speak for them, but Pat can certainly do that. We feel like we've reached an agreement that this is the best approach for everyone moving forward. And so we're grateful for their support and for the leadership that they've shown in running it past their team over there, and getting that feedback back to us and allowing us to move forward. The next steps for us would be design rework, and honestly, that's already started. A number of changes there that we think will save some money. We'll start doing some charrettes on the outside facade. Those are meetings where we're talking with different partners in the group, Baylor, us, Catalyst, talk about what the outside should look like and how it should be done, so they can start working on that exterior design. We have a CMAR contract for the garage already. We'll be getting that guaranteed maximum price from Austin Commercial once the design work is completed. The document revisions, there will be some actions that the council will need to take that revises some of those March documents we talked about earlier. Baylor and Catalyst both will be a few documents really to accomplish and execute what we talked about today with TIF board. And then we are planning a debt sale in March of 23 that would fund many of the projects we talked about. With that, I will turn it over to Paris if you don't mind, and we'll come back with the question. So we'll walk through Riverfront.
In a different venue. As Paul mentioned, I want to give you a quick update as to where things are. As a reminder, one of the great things about a mixed-use destination like this is that you have to put it together as a kind of hit apart than a jigsaw puzzle framework. So sometimes that could be a little more difficult than it appears from the outside. I think Paul just went through some of that. The hotel on top of the garage with all the parking demands, it became difficult when you layer in on top of that, the timeline, et cetera. So we can understand that. It's pretty normal in a process like this. So, I think what staff is doing and working with Baylor is great, that they're finding other solutions and ensuring that, that building is going to look good. It's going to have, hopefully a cool restaurant at the base of it. So from our standpoint, still could be a very positive outcome. You'll recall, at least in what we've been looking at, I've kind of outlined there what the programming is for Riverfront outside of the Baylor and city components. We've got obviously our first phase, which you may have seen we're starting to open, needing to work through a bunch of issues as it relates to getting infrastructure finished, et cetera. But I'll talk more about phase one in a minute. But that's 266 residential units. We've got about 6,000 feet in the first phase that we're actively marketing right now through restaurants and some retailers. And then we've got about 6,000 feet also of internal amenity space that's on the other corner on the northwest side of Webster and Parks. And when I was here last time, we went through kind of the elevations for the zoning. We're still working through that. And I'll show you some updates there in a minute. But that takes us to the half block on the west side of Clay, north of View Parks. That is 126, or actually 123 residential units and just under 11,000 feet of restaurant and space facing View Parks. And then a parking garage that has expanded, as Paul mentioned, through recent discussions with the city to be able to have some additional parks within that garage that will be open to folks on event days, et cetera, to come in. So there's actually a lot going on in that half block. We've been busy in design. We actually have our permit drawings going into the city this week. We appreciate staff's good help in that regard. We were talking to you all about helping us in terms of an efficient processing. And then up on the river, the two destination restaurants, as you recall, they're both indoor and outdoor, and they combine around kind of a play area and a common deck. And that kind of comprises with public infrastructure what Riverfront is outside of the pavilion and the pavilion garage. So the first phase I mentioned before are what we call Building 3, which is down at the corner of Second and Webster. That is open now. If you haven't noticed, please, you're welcome to go by. If we're down here, happy to show you all, give you a tour anytime. But that is open. It is leasing. We have people that are living now on site, and we've got the landscaping up around it, etc. We were able to do that because we had access off of Second Street. We didn't need to rely on University Parks, which is all torn up right now, to be able to get that building going. We're looking at University Parks getting finished with the public infrastructure work that's going on out there, so that we can do the same with our other buildings. So we kind of need those to open up for us to be able to move forward in our opening. But the good news is we do have that first building open. The second building, we anticipate, with the assumption that the infrastructure work is going to get done here pretty soon. We anticipate Building 2, which is on the south side of U Parks, right there at the intersection of Webster, will be open in December. Assuming that infrastructure gets completed in the timeframes they've mentioned. And then about 120 days thereafter, the rest of the buildings would open again, assuming the infrastructure gets completed in the timeframe.
Very short, quick, remind me the timeline for the farmer's market.
Yeah, so the farmer's market is working with those buildings as well. So it would be in that same time frame, about 120 days after, after the infrastructure is in place. So, yeah, we just.
Do we know when we think the infrastructure is going to be in place? Ballpark?
Well, we've been told that the sanitary work will be done by Thanksgiving. So I hope that's true.
But somewhere, yeah.
All right, Mayor, we'll talk more about timeline after repairs is done.
Okay.
Yeah, got the slide there. And you'll also recall on the farmers market, with the addition of the pavilion and everything else that's making up the rest of Riverfront, the original design of that park has changed. It's now a rectangle versus kind of a teardrop shape that it was before. And that design has been completed. It's in pricing right now. So that's occurring, and we made some improvements to the design on U Parks, our portion of U Parks, and Webster per the coordination that Paul had mentioned earlier. And those drawings have been done. They are being priced as well. So on Clay Street, the mixed use and restaurants that I mentioned before, we're just moving forward. As I mentioned before, we've got the permit drawings, portion in the garage into the city this week. We're still working as hard as we can to get that started in January. So we're still on track in that regard. We've selected a contractor, one of the best contractors in the region, and that's equally the case, just given the kind of need for coordination and schedule management. So Rogers O'Brien is an excellent contractor in that regard, that well known around the region for their polling work. Mentioned the permit drawings are in. The design that is in accommodates the changes to the size of the garage and the interface between the buildings and the street that we've been coordinating with the city on. And then all that will be started early next year as we all come, so that we can certainly get the garage in place in time for Taylor's events. And so we're still working on that. As for the Riverfront restaurants, they don't take as long to build as the mixed-use building. So we're working on those. We are working very carefully on who the operational partners will be on that. We've had over 50 conversations thus far. And we're real careful about what those restaurants are going to be so that they meet everyone's expectations. We nothing against certain chains, but we don't want that kind of a feel out there. We want something that's excellent. We're pretty close with a Mexican restaurant and an American Grill concept that serves both breakfast, lunch, and so we're in the thick of conversations in that regard. And the timing of the construction of those restaurants are being coordinated very carefully. You can imagine to be coordinated with the completion of different components that are out there, so that they're not trying to open in the midst of the construction. So we're working through that right now, and I would, hopefully when we have our next update, I can share a little more about who the operators are. But that's where we are there. So finally, it takes us to actually Paul's presentation earlier. You may recall in our original master development concept that the site that's directly north between us in phase 1 and the river was intended to be a full service hotel. And that's what our master development agreement with Joel anticipated. We were in active conversations in that regard even before COVID. We then, when the amazing opportunity came up and Baylor was looking at the pavilion over on this side, it was understood at that time that it made more sense for that hotel to shift over on that property. So we kind of took our foot off the gas there and focused back in on what I just went through with you. Well, now it looks like we need to redouble our efforts and go back to that site for a full service hotel. So we have been in active conversations with an operating partner on that to deliver exactly what we were talking about before, if not larger. And we're expecting to come to terms with them by year end, so that we can get things moving and have that project commence right around the first quarter of 2024. I think Paul's timeline for construction is pretty accurate there. Might be able to go a little bit faster because it doesn't have the complexities of a large parking garage underneath it. But these days, with everything in the world that's going on, it takes longer for things to get built for whatever reason. So I think his timeline is. So, I think when we have our next update, and we should be able to, share the results of that dialogue as where we are with the restaurants.
Thank you, Paris. I will conclude here with 3 more slides. The first one looks at timelines for the project, and Pat did a great job summarizing where they are with the pavilion contract. Nothing's changed from the contracts that were for that March or from the December presentation for that matter. Baylor on course, their initial plans. The pavilion garage we talked about earlier, we are still shooting for, and the architects feel they can still make parking spaces available by January 24 with the facade finish out in July following the pavilion. Catalyst phase 1, these have already been covered by Paris. I just want to highlight with all of these in the contractual arrangements, we're still on course, but I want to highlight on the next slide here that there's some infrastructure work that is critical to all of these things coming to completion. You can imagine if Clay or University Park are not done, torn up, not finished, no access, it's going to be hard to lease space and hard to get tenants in there. So these are not covered in the contracts necessarily between Baylor and the city or between Catalyst and the city, because these are city projects. You'll recall early on, Parks, it was the portion that was in the original phase 1. That work was kind of put into a larger contract for all of University Parks that the city essentially took over from Catalyst, and they show great flexibility and work. We are under design right now with Walker Partners, and we have a CMAR out on the streets now. Once that CMAR is identified, we'll first go in contract with them. They will work with us, the Catalyst, the Baylor, and certainly with Walker Partners are looking with the other construction schedule that hopefully allows all of these timings. Talked about earlier, Bears talked about contract happen. If in fact these get pushed for whatever reason, whether it's supply chain issues, workforce availability, any of the problems that we know we've already encountered on a lot of projects, if those come into play, that it will push Catalyst completion out. Another issue that could push some of their completion dates out is the Corps of Engineers and FEMA. You see here, the last item we have is the Riverwalk, which is your law school. Essentially, that we think that will be completed in January of 25, with all of 23 essentially devoted to permitting through the Corps through FEMA, and they will start construction for Paris mentioned the restaurants that are there associated with that. They'll also have to have over all the work done as well. We're trying to coordinate all that together. And there's, I think I use an analogy. There's a lot of planes circling this air traffic that goes up the land. And we're trying to make them all land in order and in sequence at the right time. And we have many meetings with many engineers and architects and Baylor's construction team, all of us trying to communicate and ask the right questions with the right folks involved, make sure that we can finish this as best we can. So everybody's on track, subject to change, obviously. And if those changes happen, then we may have to come back and say, just have to push here that we don't know that yet. I'm just trying to be clear and upfront with council today that with this much going on in this small of a space and this many people involved, people, organizations, those kinds of things, it's going to be a challenge to make all this happen. And then you throw in the uncertainty of the economy, supply chain issues, issues. It's going to be a challenge. So this is where we are with timelines. And I think I'll stop there. I have one more slide to talk briefly about the parking authority. But I think I'll stop there, Mayor. If it's all right with the council. And
Thanks for these presentations. Yeah, this is generational opportunity and really outstanding to get to play a part of it. Thanks to Paul and Bradley and the whole team. I applaud your appreciation for design, architecture, and cost. This work is an example of problem solving to ensure the best product is delivered given a big set of complex factors. I just really appreciate you balancing all that out. I recognize that this is also really fast moving and that it definitely could be subject to change. I appreciate the parking garage, the attention for creative design for parking garage to make it not look like a parking garage. I really hope we can accomplish that. On the, I guess what we're calling the plaza. I mean, I think you spoke on this a little bit, but my hope is that that space will be fully activated with creative uses, both in tenants and otherwise. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yes, sir. We have been, from an architectural design perspective, trying to maximize the space on the plaza side that's available for potentially like restaurants where you have outdoor seating. You could have, think of roll-up doors or something where that all opens up into the plaza space, complements the design work that Taylor is doing in the plaza now and complements that sense of activation there. I think we are looking at that. The whole facade on the pavilion side is something that intrigues everyone. There's some real opportunity there to do some really special, exciting things with video boards and other things on the side. And we continue to have those discussions. We're trying to schedule, as I said, some charrettes with the different parties after Thanksgiving, before Christmas, to talk through what that looks like in terms of design. So yes, Mayor, I think that's a critical part. And that's one of the discussion points we had throughout the process was the need for activation. If it's just a parking garage that's going to be there with no hotel above it, what can we do on the ground floor to draw people, restaurants, retail spaces even, and complement the food so that it seems active. It doesn't seem like just a park sitting there waiting. There's something happening at the ground level control.
That sounds great. I think that that's something that we're really pulling together a lot of creative strategic thinkers to ensure that we have that is going to be important, but that sounds like right on track. Paris, have you selected a hotel that you're talking to or working with? Yep.
We're in detailed conversations with a group that you all know, but we're not at liberty to share that right now publicly. But I think by the next time we come back, we'll be able to consider.
Okay. The hotel timeline on here says January 27. Is that when you think the hotel will be complete? I know that's what the contract says, but
Mayor, that is the contractual requirement, and they're obviously on track there. But I did show here that they're pushing to commence that in 24, as Paris mentioned earlier in his slide. So contractually, it's this January 27 timeframe completion, but they are, as I said, in active discussions now, so they think that can move up, but we're not ready to make the contraction.
I'm not asking for contractual change, but what do you hope it can be, Paris? Like, what would be your goal to get that done?
It's about a 10 to 12 month design and permitting process. And then it's upwards of about 24 months to build it.
So it's a 3 years top to bottom to get complete.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay. And that would be going real fast.
That's all the questions I have.
Holmes here, then I'll jump in. Great presentation, all three fantastic. And I'm struck by the number of projects we have going on. You just count them out. We got the pavilion, the hotel, the garage, the Riverwalk, the U Parks and Clay, the farmers market, restaurants, the Catalyst Riverfront, which in and of itself is 3 or 4 or 5 projects together, and just the engineering and design work, and the construction, and the contracting, and the legal agreements, and there's a lot of moving parts to this, and it's sequencing and coordination is key, and it seems like we have the right parties in place here to make this happen, and I'm pleased to see a pretty ambitious timeline, given all these things basically coming out of the ground from scratch here, and I'm impressed. This is really good. I mean, I think the whole city's been waiting for us to do something on the riverfront. And all you have to do is go by there, drive by there, and look, it's happening. It's happening now. And it's gone from concept to a completion timeline here that we'll all be looking pretty closely at as time goes by here. I'm going back to the hotel or the garage hotel. I'm supportive of what we're talking about. I think it makes sense to kind of separate those two, decouple, and that architectural massing was kind of an interesting way of looking at it. But to me, that's one less moving part. I mean, it seems to me like a garage is going to be easier to build than a garage plus a hotel. I had a question on the economics of it. Are we saving any money? And I know because the city committed X number of dollars to build the garage, but that was like, I guess with the hotel on top of it, or is it basically the same? Is there any delta?
There will be some savings. I think one of the challenges that we've had all along in the design process is you can spend, Harrison Reese and I were talking about this earlier today, you can spend as much on the facade screening as you do on the garage. Some of those pictures I showed you probably did that. It's not something that we're recommending, but because that design element isn't completely not laid out, we're challenged to speak to exactly what that's going to look like. The number that I showed you, the 19 million on a per space basis with all in soft cost, hard cost is around 42,000. That's a lot of money. We think budgetarily that allows for the right stuff to be done at the retail level earlier, and also some good work on the exterior design. So we feel better about that. I think maybe saving money. We are going to save some money in the design and open construction of the garage. I think probably more accurate rather than say savings is allow us to shift some of those dollars over to some of the facade work.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, great report, and I appreciate Paris, Patrick, and Paul. Oh, it's 3 Ps too. Oh, it's Clearwater Revival and 3 Ps. Great report. I would like to do this on, because everything is here in the next, some of it's 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. If we could do this on a quarterly basis, or just kind of get the update on. It doesn't have to be this in depth, but just maybe look at the last few pages on the timeline, and just make sure if there's anything council can do to help move things along. Because I'm thinking on the river walk, and I think Dylan may have sort of, or the mayor may have kind of, like at the last meeting, where which to me the river walk is going to tie this whole thing together and be the shiny part on the front that everybody is really going to love. But these are federal kind of hurdles with the Corps and FEMA. So if there's anything we can do to help, or have our congressman help, senators help on there too, let us do what we can to move that along. So, appreciate everybody's work.
Any other questions or comments? Thanks, guys.
The last thing I'll cover, just, this is the last element really of the day here. And this is actually on your agenda for action tonight. We have an ordinance to create the municipal parking authority. That is a requirement of our MDA with the city of Baylor. This will help manage the public spaces throughout the area. The boundaries of that now are the River 35, South Third, and Washington, a little bit broader area, clean up some public spaces throughout that corridor. The Chapter 601 of the Texas Local Government Code really lays out how this is structured, so we're really using it essentially. The board is going to be made up of 5 members. The MDA between the city and Baylor sets that 3 from the city, 1 from Baylor. Have us, so we'll be working. And that's on your agenda tonight. First read. If there are any questions?
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Paul, I owe you an apology. I think I do. I've been thinking about it for 40 minutes. You'd think I'd have a better apology written in my head, but man, the complexity when I was on the team kind of thinking through that deal, nowhere there did I think of the complexity that was going to be layered on. So just it's really great to have a team member like Paul Kane in the city manager's office that can take on that responsibility, and they're doing amazing. Next up, Mr. Peters, come on down. We have a discussion of accessory dwelling units, ADUs. He's going to refer to them a few times. Inviting Clint Peters, our Director of Development Services, to give a presentation. He's going to brief the council on some potential ordinance changes that would further open up the city to accessory dwelling units. And ADUs, as he'll describe you, are commonly used to provide affordable as well as intergenerational housing within our neighborhoods. So, Clint, it's all yours.
Sure, thanks, Bradley. Thanks, Mayor, City Council. This discussion actually is a continuation of discussion that came out of the Housing Task Force in starting to implement some of the recommendations out of the Waco Strategic Housing Study that the council adopted earlier this year. So what we're going to talk about today is what is an ADU, some of the benefits of ADUs, ADU recommendations from different organizations, and then some potential design and development standards for implementing and allowing ADUs in Waco and next steps. So what is an ADU? So an ADU is a separate additional living unit on a single family lot, separate from the primary structure, that includes independent living facilities for 1 or more persons with provisions for living, sleeping, eating, cooking, and sanitation. And then here's some examples of different types. It can be part of the primary structure in an attic space or a basement in the existing home. It could be an addition to an existing home attached to it. And then most commonly you see them detached in the backyard of a home or above a garage, similar to a garage apartment. And some of the benefits of ADUs is a win-win from an affordability standpoint. It provides an affordable housing unit, an additional affordable housing unit. Typically, ADUs are cheaper from a unit standpoint than you see in multifamily complexes. It also provides additional income from the owner of the property that could potentially be the difference in being able to afford home ownership. It provides opportunities, as Bradley mentioned, for multi-generational family living and aging in place. And this is a chart that shows the trend over the past 50 years in multi-generational living going up from about 50 years ago. It was about 15 million multi-generational families across the country, and now we're up to about 55 million, which makes up almost 20% of our family units are multi-generational living units. And then allows better efficient use of the existing infrastructure. The infrastructure is already there. We're adding housing units to already developed neighborhoods, and so there's no additional infrastructure needed to serve those. And then when you have a shift in economy, it does make more resiliency with changing market conditions. So some of the recommendations, this was, as mentioned earlier, a recommendation out of the Waco Strategic Housing Plan for a supply strategy to amend ordinance to allow higher density housing, in this case ADU. It also was a recommendation out of our Waco Comprehensive Plan 2040 as a housing implementation strategy. Several other national organizations have recommended ADUs as an important housing strategy, include Department of Housing and Urban Development, National League of Cities, the National Home Builders Association, and the American Planning Association, to name a few. It is a trend nationwide for cities to start allowing these, including Texas cities, Austin, San Antonio, Houston, El Paso, Denton, and College Station. Staff has been working with the High Density Housing Committee of the task force to talk through some of the standards that would need to be put in place for ADUs, with the ultimate goal of allowing the ADUs in single-family residential neighborhoods while preserving the character of neighborhoods. So you don't want to change the character of our core neighborhoods from what they are now. And so there's some proposed design and development standards that we'd like to consider to make sure that we're keeping that single-family neighborhood character. And I'm just going to go through a couple of these ideas. The first one would be to just allow one ADU per lot with the existing house already in place or constructed in conjunction with the ADU. So the primary house would need to be there. ADU setbacks would be very similar to what's allowed with the primary structure. Can't be out in front of the primary structure. And then has the same front and rear yard setbacks. There is a requirement in the building code for fire safety that it has to be at least 10 feet from the primary structure or any other structure from adjacent lots. And then we did want to allow where there's an existing structure to be adapted or reconstructed or exempt from the setback requirement. So if you have a garage in the rear of your property, you could add an ADU on top of that. Unit size, we do want it to be smaller than the primary structure. And so the idea is that you would have an accessory unit size of not to exceed 30% of the size of the floor area for the primary unit. We do want this to be this opportunity to be used for all areas of the city. And so where you do have smaller housing units, the idea is to, if you're less than 30%, you can build up to at least a 500 square foot ADU. And the idea there is that the Waco Housing Authority was on this in this group, and 500 square feet is the minimum they need to a requirement for a housing voucher. So that would allow somebody to build a unit that would be qualified for housing vouchers. And then height would be same as the primary dwelling unit as well. Occupancy, we do want this to be encouraged for home ownership. So the property owner shall reside on the property. There was a lot of discussion about should that be in the primary structure, and because of some of the dynamics of people wanting to be able to age in place, we felt like as somebody ages and maybe not be able to maintain a primary structure where they could live in the ADU and then rent out the primary structure, so that the owner would have to be just on the property and not in the main structure. And San Antonio does this by requiring an affidavit affirming the ownership requirements that we filed at the parking requirements would be similar to what's allowed for the primary structure. You don't want to have a separate driveway, again, to keep that lower density character. So it'd have to be off the primary driveway, or if there's an alley way to the property, you can have a secondary access point. Site coverage would be the same as what's required for the primary structure, so at least 75%, or at least 25% of the lot would need to be impervious cover. And then building elevations and materials would be required to be similar to the primary structure. And then also utility connections for city utilities, water and sewer, would need to come through the primary structure. We don't want to have a separate meter for water and sewer that could lead to potentially illegally subdividing or creating a separate lot, which could create problems. And what we did, again, it was real important that this opportunity could be afforded to, all property owners within residential areas, not just people that have large lots. We took a minimum lot size that you see a lot in the core of the neighborhood, which would be a 50-foot wide lot, 6,000 square foot, to see if by applying the standards, could you do an ADU? And this example here shows almost a 2,000 square foot home on a 50-foot lot that meets all the standards for parking, access, and then a 500 square foot ADU in the rear. Next steps, as I mentioned, we'd already been working with a high density housing committee and with the housing task force to come up with these proposed standards. We want to use the neighborhood associations for a public input process. Send out the information to them and then offer to come speak at any of their association meetings for providing more information, and then go through the formal process of amending the ordinance through the Plan Commission and City Council and early next year. Happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Josh.
Sure thing, Clint. Thank you for presenting this to us. And just to kind of clarify in terms of what currently is permitted, is you can have an accessory dwelling unit on your single family residence property currently, and someone, including the owner, can live there currently, but that unit currently cannot have a full kitchen. And that's the distinction between that and some other standards to impose.
Sure. So yeah, that's correct. So in our ordinance, they're classified as guest quarters. And so, because they're not allowed to have that full kitchen that would, make it an independent dwelling unit. So currently you can't have guest quarters. You can rent those out. You just can't have the full kitchen.
Full kitchen. Because once you have a full kitchen, because it currently can have a bathroom, you have a bedroom, you can have some living space in it, but a full kitchen kind of creates another dwelling unit, I guess, as opposed to guest quarters. But I suppose under the housing task force, this is giving homeowners more options, and not only to rent out one of these two units, whether it be the ADU or the main house, but also it gives you some intergenerational options.
Correct.
Is that kind of the option there, or
That's
kind of
correct.
the thinking behind it?
That's correct.
Okay. And that there are certain neighborhoods, primarily those from kind of before World War II, that currently have legal non-conforming residences and ADUs that essentially have been grandfathered in before the ordinances that are in effect now took place. Is
That's
that
correct. In our core neighborhoods, and several of those pictures were ones that were legal non-conforming ADUs that were built before zoning ordinances were in place.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Holmes here. I'm following what Mayor Pro Tem's observation was on this, that basically we can already do this, right? But for the kitchen and some other little things, full-blown, fully operational kitchen. But if somebody wants to build a guest quarters out back, they could do that. They could do that 5 years ago. They could do it last week. They could do it tomorrow before all this comes into place. Go ahead.
Yeah, it just makes it more of an independent dwelling unit to have that full kitchen, showers, bedroom.
And it's not
Living space,
necessarily it's detached. We're talking about a basement, a garage, attic space, or somewhere in the house where somebody might want to, do they have to, this is by right, so I guess if you just had it in the garage or an attached part, you could just start using it and charge rent, right? You don't-
Correct.
you
You'd have
don't-
to come in and get a permit to remodel that space, to
Okay.
add the kitchen. And so that's when this would come into play.
Because I guess, yeah, they'd want to put a full kitchen in there. I guess if they already have a guest house without a full kitchen.
They would do a remodel permit.
if
But
they
it
want
wouldn't
to.
involve, I'm sorry, but it wouldn't involve coming to us for a permit.
No, none of this.
would be-
The idea would be that this would be permitted by
By
right,
right.
okay,
with those
sorry.
standards in place.
I think.
Yes.
I just had some general notes here and just rapid fire questions. It's not, it won't be platted separately, right? So we're not, this
No,
still stays under
yeah.
one deed.
Yeah, that we don't want it to create situations where you start platting these off and, because then you start potentially changing the dynamic of neighborhoods with, subdivided properties.
Do we know if anybody, it might be interesting before the final thing next May or whatever, to see if there are standards around trying to split that at some point, 5 years from now, or for somebody that's done it 4 or 5 years, they are splitting the deed and trying to sell off both houses or.
Yeah, I
one.
think and that's why the utility part of that is real important. So if you don't allow separate meters and everything runs through the primary house, the plumbing
Got it.
to the water and sewer meter for the primary house, it's more difficult to plat that off and separate, sell that off separate.
Are there, in other places in the East Coast, West Coast, I've been making this sort of an official thing for years now. This still would be subject to deed restrictions in whatever particular, wherever your home is. If your home is subject to deed restrictions, you have to respect that.
That's correct.
Has there been any study around like infrastructure load? Like if you all of a sudden everybody on that street has a house out back and they've got twice as much water use and wastewater and solid waste and trash, and parking and all that. Is there?
So I think because of the size limitations on it, and with the typical residential meters, the load's going to be there. When you get into really large houses, it takes a really large house and a lot of capacity to go from, a 3/4 inch standard residential meter up size. So we feel like the existing infrastructure and meters can handle that extra load that it's going to add.
Are we concerned about, I did a little bit of analysis on this. Like parking, possible overcrowding, I guess the ones that jumped out at me, the appearance of neighborhoods, and the change in the nature of single family neighborhoods. Have we seen, I guess before we get the final thing next March or May or whenever we're talking about, just some history on that. No, it doesn't
Sure,
really affect
yeah.
the nature of it.
And that's why we wanted to use the neighborhood associations as kind of our public input, just to make sure we're thinking of everything and that we're not creating a situation that it changes neighborhood character. I mean, if this works right, you won't, when you're driving down the street, you won't be able to tell.
And then the whole program is a month. This isn't STR related. I mean, this isn't night to night stuff. This is all renting month to month, more permanence to the construct. Okay. Appreciate everybody's work on getting this. I think everybody's kind of doing it. Like Mayor Pro Tem said, can already kind of do it. You just can't put a full blown kitchen in there. So I guess we're making it all official. It's good.
I have a comment, Clint. I truly appreciate this process, and I really appreciate the ADU folks in my age group. Probably really appreciate knowing, hey, I'll be able to stay in my house or built an ADU in the back of the house, so the family has the front part of the house, and I'm going to stay in the back part, which makes folks, like I said, in my age group, feel better about not having to go somewhere in a home or something like that.
And
Put me
also makes
somewhere.
it
They
more
may put me
affordable.
there
Yeah.
anyway, but,
Yeah.
I mean, we feel better about the ADU knowing that you're gonna be in your own lot, in your own home, basically. Or if you have another relative that needs a place to go, that you know that you can build a place there following the perimeters and the guidelines of the ADU process. Myself here on the council, I really appreciate this. I was looking through it and I said, oh, wow, we're thinking about us. So thank you very much for this and the housing committee that did this.
Yeah, sure.
I really support this effort. I think it's great.
I agree that it is a really easy solution to increase housing stock that's desperately needed in our community and comply with the housing plan that we have in place. Clint, quick question. Have any cities done this and had any unintended consequences?
No, and not that I've heard of. I think managing it and putting these standards on it, cities, it's evolved over years, and that's where a lot of these standards came from. And so I think cities that have been thoughtful and put the standards in place, there really hasn't been unintended consequences.
I think that's going to be my priority is high design standards and ensuring that the character of neighborhoods and the quality of the units is only improving the aesthetic of the specific lot where it's constructed. And no one subjectively could even argue that it is a sloppy construction or something that's going to bring down the value of it. Thanks.
Can I piggyback on that? Because here it said, when you built the ADU, that it be compatible and have pretty much the same materials as the house. So if you have an all brick home, the ADU has to be all brick, or can it be something compatible?
Yeah, I think it would be, I think it would have to complement it. So there would have, like, if you have a brick house, there would need to be some elements of brick in there. I don't know if we would go all the way to say it has to be all brick, but those are the things that we can look at and discuss when we start drafting the ordinance.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Clint.
Any other questions? Nope. All right, thanks, Clint.
Thank you.
Don't go far, Clint. We got more, got Act 2 coming up. Council, our next work session is a discussion and update on land acquisition for a park in China Spring. And each year, the council gets to act on and review about 900 or so items on its agenda. And every so often, I get the chance to bring forward an item that feels historically significant. And this work session and its associated resolution 874 fit that bill. As Tom's going to explain, Tom's our Assistant Director of Parks. He's going to explain in detail. The acquisition of a park site in China Spring has been a goal of ours for several years. And we've had a few failed attempts at acquiring property out that way. But tonight we have the chance to move ahead on the purchase of a regional park site with more than 85 acres that connects into hundreds of acres more of core property. And I'm excited for Tom to share the details with the council and public about what he's been working on. Tom?
So much, City Manager Ford. And again, I am Tom Balk, the Assistant Director of the Parks Department. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to share this exciting news with you. I'd be remiss not to mention no one's more excited than perhaps our Parks Director, Jonathan Cook, who's been involved in this process for several years. So he regrets that he was not able to be here tonight, but all the better opportunity for me to share the news with you. We're going to get into some exciting details, but to recap and kind of identify where this process started for us, I think I gave the presentation in 2017 that adopted our Parks, Recreation, Open Space Master Plan. And it was that document that provided not only the analysis that identified some of our coverage gaps for neighborhood park and community park coverage throughout our community, but also it was that process and its public engagement that catalyzed a very hungry neighborhood group from the China Spring area to say, hey, we have needs out here, and how do we talk about this? So it's been very exciting to see the outgrowth from that, because that conversation gave them the momentum to start a neighborhood association that didn't exist, and their advocacy has been continuous. We've had good representation on the park board, and I know that we've had a steady dialogue going on through their council member representing District 5. So it's very cool to see government work that way. And so since 2017, we've launched into doing that homework of studying what the criteria need to be as we explore property acquisition. And so moving into fiscal year 21 and 22, funds were allocated to support that effort, to support the acquisition or partnership or development in some fashion of at least a neighborhood park that can meet the needs of the growing China Spring area. So in 21 and 22, we budgeted for $1.8 million to get that process started. But as the city manager mentioned, through 3 separate proposals for land and development, ultimately none of those worked out. None of those ended up being viable. So today is the culmination of many years of effort. Many hands have touched this thing. I think certainly property management, but the legal team at large, I mean, several members in the city manager's office in particular have supported getting us to this finish line to where ultimately, I think maybe you'll agree that it's worth the wait. We've got a very exciting property, but the nuts and bolts are the address at 5201 Flat Rock Road. It's more or less the intersection of Flat Rock and Skeet-Eason, right there by the airport. And there's 2 bordering tracks, and it totals about 85 acres for us. So when you look at the purchase price, that's over $3 million, an additional closing cost of over $100,000. So in total, about $3.275 million to get the deal authorized. The nuts and bolts continue to be to say that it's more or less it's 3 tracks that we're talking about. One of those tracks has a buffer that's retained by the seller, and another of those tracks for 2 years will have a lease back option due to an existing residence there, so that allows the time for any changes that may come. However, upon acquisition, we can still do the planning necessary to envision what the future may entail. But truly, the most exciting part of this is its position, strategic location, and what it can do for us, not only at present, but into the future. So this zoom out kind of shows you that context of the surroundings, the adjacent Waco Regional Airport, the adjacency to the Army Corps of Engineers parkland, and how close that is truly to the existing Waco Dam Trail. So with little imagination and leaning heavily on the feedback that we received through the citywide trails master planning process that we're capping this year, there is a strong recognition of the trail connectivity potential, not only bring neighborhoods into these existing parklands and trail resources, connecting right into those core neighborhoods of Waco, but also reaching out further into the existing neighborhoods and future neighborhoods that will continue to grow in China Spring. So that's pretty exciting for us from a planning standpoint and visioning standpoint. Zooming in a little bit and looking at just some of the real basic analysis, we know that we've got a lot of agricultural presence on site with some significant forest that has existed at least through the 1940s. Some of the explanation for that is that we do have floodplain, we do have some restrictions based on the water flow through this area. But I think ultimately that ends up being one of the strengths of the property and its applicability as a resource for some natural attractions. These are some photos of the character, kind of the edge conditions, what the street connectivity looks like at present, but also what the flavor of that forested area lends itself to. So I think with little imagination, you can see that there's a variety of community resources that can start layering into this site to serve those community and regional park needs. Certainly, I don't want to fail to mention the wildlife value of this property as well. There's certainly a lot of birds and deer and other things that just make it very fun for a lot of users. So we're excited for the potential of this property, and we're just as excited to start leaning into what do those next steps look like. So today's resolution authorizes the transaction to proceed. I talked a little bit about the purchase price. How are we funding it? We're proposing to use the balance of the existing CIP funds that are already allocated, as well as bond reimbursement from funds that were allocated for fiscal year 23 that were in. Those bond proceeds are anticipated in spring of 23. So we would do a bond reimbursement in the meantime, and that allows us to conclude with a closing date of December 30th of this year. But certainly it doesn't stop there. We need to be thinking and talking about the design and development process. So we have already been in communication with the consultant that we are recommending for the project to initiate that scoping and phasing discussion. We anticipate their proposal in hand very soon to bring a contract award back in the near future. But they understand that one of our primary objectives here is to kick off that public engagement in early 2023. And really, one of the things that we're excited about here is to tap back into that energy and that vitality from the neighborhood that helped get us to this point. You know, the champions of this cause. We want to harness that energy and bring it back into the vision process. So with that in mind, it will take a little bit of time and funding due to some of the unique properties of the site. But we want to be on track for construction in early 2022. So again, that development funding strategy, one thing of note that I just want to mention here is because this site is larger and has some significantly more recreation value than what we'd originally considered. But we do recommend increasing the construction budget to be at least compatible with a phase 1 development to meet our community park standards. So that's a total of $3 million for development. So we have some of that fund, or we anticipate retaining some of the funding from fiscal year 23 dollars that are allocated. That will allow us to move right into design. But with additional funding, we should be able to envision a phase 1 of community park standards. That's a total of 3.5. So again, you know, it's never that we get to bring an exciting opportunity like this to a council recommendation, and I echo the city manager's excitement for this. I've got a lot of thanks to everybody that's had a hand in this. So with that, I'll turn it over for some questions.
I'll jump in here, Mayor. This is so exciting. I mean, you talk about game changers, and we just had the Riverfront project, game changer, Steam Center, game changer, Floyd Casey redevelopment, game changer, TSTC workforce, game changer. This is gotta be careful. This is a heck of a great game changer we've got that right when I first got on council, this was one of the main objectives of the China Spring neighborhoods. And so happy to see this. We were patient, as you said. We've went through 3 different iterations, and we thought we had one, and that one didn't work out. We thought we had another one, didn't work out. Another one didn't work out. I'm so happy that this one is better than the other 3 combined. There's so much possibility here. It's a bigger space. The connectivity is sitting in exactly the right place. Lots of acreage for future. We can just dream about what else could go on 80 acres because not all of it will necessarily be used for the park. But there's a lot of needs out in the China Spring areas. It's one of the fastest growing. West Highway 84 and the western part of the city is growing like crazy. This isn't the suburbs. This is the city of Waco. Yeah. So this part of the city doesn't have a park. So I appreciate all the work that staff has done. Tommy, you and Jonathan. Particularly working through this 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, or 3 forward, 2 back, or whatever, to get to this point is so rewarding. So again, thank you for all the work you did, and I'm sure as the China Spring residents hear about this, they are going to be very excited. And it's just a great asset for the city of Waco, and I appreciate everybody's work on this.
I will echo my colleagues' praise for the Parks Department, but also I want to definitely give him kudos for being such a strong advocate for a fast-growing region in our city, and to the China Springs Neighborhood Association as well for advocating for parks. I think, as Councilmember Holmes said, when we annex a new neighborhood, or when a neighborhood is built out kind of in the outlying areas, but within our city boundaries, they're just as much a city resident as someone living in the core of the city, and they need the same type of high quality services. And I think this is a big win for China Spring, and it shows our city investment in that area. And I appreciate the city management's office prioritizing this area and our other two kind of fast growing areas of the city in terms of an investment of this size. So excited about this park for our friends in China Spring and for the city as a whole.
I echo my colleagues. And I think this is really exciting. You know, you guys know I'm all about parks and everything for our kids to be able to enjoy. This is a long time coming, Jim, for your district. And I'm glad it's happening under your tenure. So, because I know you've been so excited and very a strong advocate of this park. And thank you, Park Department, Jonathan, for bringing this to fruition, staff. You know, it means a lot to us to be able to go back to our constituents and tell them, hey, wait up, it's coming. So thank you for that.
I love the City of Waco map, and I think sometimes people forget even that China Springs or Hidden Valley or Harris Creek Church or parts of the Ritchie Road corridor or even in the City of Waco. And I think Councilmember Bordridge said that so well, that we're committed to each of these parts of the city. And in the same way that we're committed to downtown and the neighborhoods around downtown, no matter what we do in the four walls of City Hall, we are going to be strategic and proactive in our planning and thoughtful in bringing amenities to our residents. And this is an exciting opportunity that I think is, you know, it is becoming par for the course that we're getting to say generational opportunities or doing these significant momentous things because it's just so exciting, all of the things that we're getting to do right now. And but this is a critical investment from a long-term strategy perspective. And I'm really excited about the years of enjoyment that will come for so many families who will be able to utilize this park. Thanks to our city staff for their hard work on this. I know that they've hunted and worked hard on this, so I appreciate it very much.
Definitely. And thanks,
It's been real
Tom.
busy.
Yeah, there's no
Staff's
doubt.
been real busy.
Thanks,
No
Tom, for
Thanks,
pulling
Tom.
double duty today. He presented to Rotary at lunch, so had a lot going on. I do want to say one other thanks. You know, we've I hadn't made a formal request for Ryan or Bree to work on property all day long, but Bree from the legal department and Ryan Holt from my office were really central to making sure this deal went through and being real creative. So I wanted to say a special thanks to both Bree and Ryan. All right. Clint, how many? 10 public hearings? Let's hear them. Let's hear all about them. I think what I'm planning to do is have us stop at about 5:15 or 5:20. Clint might get through all 10 public hearings, but we'll just kind of monitor our watches, and that way you'll have a nice break before the business session.
We're going to do 1 minute per case.
We'll try to remember that.
Yeah. Load. Okay. Into my 1 minute.
Alice, I think this would have been a nice time for the live music that we were
Yeah, where's
discussing.
the mariachi at?
You
I
know.
don't know what happened. This would have been a good time.
It's a big presentation. All right. So our first public hearing is dealing with our subdivision plats. We have 2 plats. The first one is preliminary plat of Prairie View Estates Edition. This is a new single-family residential subdivision out in the ETJ along Old Lorena Road, about 3 miles from our city limits down at the 84 corridor. That's proposed to be 42 single-family lots, all 1 acre in size, will be served with septic for sewer, which is the 1 acre is the minimum lot size. And this area is served with City of Lake water. And then the next plat is a replat of the Walmart on Hewitt Drive. They're platting out a small lot for an out parcel for a restaurant, which does require a water line extension. Therefore, it's having to come to council for approval. And both of these plats are recommended by the Plan Commission for approval.
Clint, real quick, first plat is in ETJ. It's not an annexation. It's just since it's in the ETJ, it has to go through this, right?
That's correct. Yeah. The next public hearing is a request for a special permit for a car washing establishment in C2 zoning district on property located at 2314 Marketplace Drive. This is in the Central Texas Marketplace development. It's the last property, undeveloped property on Marketplace Drive as you enter into the development. You can see the zoning there is all C2 for the shopping center, and there's some O2 that backs up to it, where you have some of the residential, high-density residential units. Here's their site plan. It does have a large area for queuing into the car wash. This is Marketplace Drive up here. There is a median there, so all the traffic will have to be right in, right out only. There was some concern from the adjacent property owner, Baylor Scott and White, who has a clinic there. And so this case was actually continued at the Plan Commission for a month to let the applicant work through those concerns with Baylor Scott and White, and they have worked those out. We did add some conditions to the recommendation to address some of those concerns. Some of those include some additional signage as you exit out of the car wash, and then signage against prohibiting loud music on the site. There's also a requirement. They were already proposing that the facility only be open between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. But we did add a requirement that the facility should be staffed during all hours of operation. And then some landscaping requirements along the back property line adjacent to the residential back there to buffer it. And some no median cuts on Marketplace Drive, so it will have to be right in, right out only to accommodate the traffic. Plan Commission did recommend an approval of this with all the conditions by a vote of 7-0. The next public hearing is for a short-term rental type 1 in R1B zoning. This is at 4608 Bagby Avenue. This is a single-family house on an acre property that has a back guest quarter that they'd like to rent out for short-term rental. Owners live in the main house. Again, short-term rental type 1 is where the owner is on site. Here's the property. It's near the intersection of Bagby and New Road. The property actually goes from Bagby back to Wood. There's a little small residential pocket right there along Bagby. Single-family zoning, there is commercial uses somewhat around it when you get closer to the intersection. Here's the property. They have a large circular drive, and then the actual guest quarters has an access drive off of Wood Avenue at the rear of the property, which would be used for guests. Here's the main house, and then the back unit that they want to SDR. There is a requirement that they upgrade that driveway to our parking standards before they get their license. And then here's just another picture of the wood on that side. We did mail out 21 notices and had no response, and Plan Commission did recommend approval of this one as well, 7-0.
I think that one is used to be in District 3, now in District 2, and kind of nicely near the new car wash corridor that we're developing.
That's right.
Bagby and New Road. It's an added feature.
Put that on their advertisement.
Thank you for that, John. More car wash.
Yeah. So the next public hearing is actually renewal of a special permit for My Brother's Keeper, which is the shelter run by Mission Waco at 1217 Mary Avenue. This is shelter that's been in place since 2006. It's operated since then for 56 adults. It initially was a men's shelter, but now they offer both men and women opportunities there for shelter. You see, it's zoned C5, kind of in the core downtown area. Here's the building. They did get letters of support from some of the surrounding property owners, including Waco Habitat, Axe Church, Caritas, and Balcones Distilling, which are all within a 1 block radius. So I think that tells a lot of how they kept this operation in good standing with an important need for our community. We did mail out 16 notices on this one, and we just got 1 response in favor of the request, along with all the letters of recommendation from the surrounding property owners. And Plan Commission did recommend approval of this by a vote of 7-0 for another 5-year period.
I did look at that real close, and I read everything that they do and how they permit and how they issue ways for the occupants, I guess, to be able to use that facility. And I thought that was great. The only thing I would have to say is 2 blocks from there is going to be our Cotton Palace Park. The only problem we have seen is, of course, the homeless have been using the baseball fields and the facilities around there as places to go and stay when they can't get into the facility on Mary. So I was just wondering if we couldn't look at how we can protect. I know we can't lock the fields, but I know a lot of times they go into the bathrooms, and when our kids go, it scares them when they go. But anyway, that aside, is there any way that we can help the Cotton Palace new park that's coming into a way to protect the fields? And I don't know how to say this, but
I think it's really important that I think that, again, challenging, complex issues that we're facing here, but I think that I think that staff would probably be really willing to engage in conversations about how to ensure that the facilities nearby this location and other areas where there's frequent traffic by the people experiencing homelessness might be able to, where we can make sure our facilities are secure and that the neighbors nearby there feel very safe.
I'd like to have that conversation, please. City manager, he's over there in the corner hiding from me, but I see him. But anyway, yes, I would. Okay. Y'all know that's real important for me. I know we haven't had any big issues with where it's at, the facility, the shelter is at now. I just want to make sure that we don't.
All right, so our next public hearing, 865, is a requested rezoning for a portion of 4901 Franklin Avenue from M2 to C2. This is the Waco Motorsports property behind Academy, the shopping center where Academy is. Their zoning is currently M2, and they have a special permit for RV recreational vehicles sales for like ATVs and such. And they're building a new building on site and would like to have some commercial uses in that building. And so they're requesting to rezone 10,000 square feet of that larger property to commercial to coincide where the building is to allow commercial uses there. This is our land use plan, which is mixed use flex, which does encourage commercial uses. The corridor along Franklin and Waco Drive. Then you can see the zoning where there's that commercial zoning. There's quite a bit of commercial zoning on that corridor too. And then here's the site where the construction of the new building is going on. Looking up and down Franklin Avenue. Plan Commission, we did mail out 7 notices and had none returned, and Plan Commission did recommend approval of this request. The next public hearing, 866, is the 1700 block of Proctor Avenue. The original request was for the 1705 property. and the city expanded it to include the rest of the block. And the requested change is to change the land use designation from mixed use flex and medium density residential to urban residential, and the rezone that block from C2 and C3 to R1B. And the reason for that is when you start looking at this block, this is along 18th Street and then near the Herring Lyle corridor. But the majority of this block is either vacant lots or single family residential with some new construction residential. And actually the original applicant is wanting to build a home there. And so that's why they expanded it to provide that residential zoning for that whole block. And you can see the land use plan called for it to be medium density or mixed use flex, where you go a block over and all that yellow is urban residential, more low density residential. And then the zoning, the northern side of the block is already commercial, and then that would all be changed to single family zoning. And then there's one lot that's zoned commercial on the south side of the block. The rest of it's already single family, so we're just changing the land use designation on the southern side of the block, and then that one lot for zoning. Here's the subject property, 1705, and then the rest of the block will be expanded. And then you look on the other side of the street and you start seeing renovated houses and new construction. So it made sense to get all this block, except for the commercial uses that face 17th Street or 18th Street into residential zoning. I would point out at the Plan Commission, we had mailed 40 notices and had no return. And the Plan Commission recommended approval 7-0. We did, one of the owners at 1701, which is the corner lot adjacent to this property at Proctor and 17th, reached out to us today and did not want their property rezoned from commercial to residential. They actually own the building along Herring Avenue at the corner of Herring and 17th, and would like to keep their property zoned commercial for future potential commercial development, either parking or a commercial building. I think just the dynamics of that block with all the recent residential renovations and new construction, and the applicant at 1705 wanting to build a residential structure there, our recommendation would be still to approve the rezoning for that whole block. But I didn't want to mention that the owner at 1701 would like their property to be. So, which again would be okay with staff, but as well, we'd like to change the rest of them. But it makes sense to us to have that whole block zoned to residential to protect those homes that are being built and proposed to be built.
So you're saying these aren't all owned by one person? So
no, they're all different owners.
So, okay. We've ever done that before? Had a blanket one?
Yeah, so 1705, the original applicant, the owner of 1705, see, but it's the two lots in the middle of the block. There, okay. You can see my pointer. There's two lots there.
Yep.
That was the original applicant that requested the rezoning of those two properties. The city expanded it to include all the rest of those lots in that dark area. The owner of 1701, which is this corner lot right here, is requesting that their property stay commercial zoning.
But do we have affirmative statements from the other 7 lots, I guess, that they want to change?
So the other 4 of them are already single family homes.
Okay.
And then the other 2 are the original applicant, and then there's one more lot that's vacant. And so we mailed out the notices. We didn't get any response except for the owner at 1701.
Do we know the owner I guess we know the owner of the vacant lot, but did they consent to the change too? It seems weird that we're just changing without the owners.
So
Confirmation.
It's pretty common, especially when we're bringing land uses into conformance, because right now you have residential lots that are zone commercial.
Hmm.
And so typically that hasn't been an issue with owners. And we've done larger areas that where we've expanded, where it made sense to rezone it. In this case, we did get a response back from one of the owners that wants to keep it commercial.
So tonight we'll be voting on all of them except for 1701.
So staff's recommendation is that still rezone it, all of it, but you certainly can remove properties if you so choose.
And Clint, I'm looking at the satellite trying to see, but it looks like almost each one of these lots, maybe with the exception of one, are unimproved lots that are surrounded by residential. Is that correct?
That's on the north side, yes, and then on the south side, it's
Commercial on 18.
yeah. Well, this is the south side, so it's all single family, and this is actually a new construction.
Are any of the lots currently have a structure that's a house or a business on them of the ones that are proposed to be
For the
changed?
commercial zoning, there's one lot, and then for these houses right here are zoned residential, but they have a commercial land use. So we're requesting to change the land use designation, which is our comprehensive plan, bringing the zoning in conformance with. So on the map, those houses there are, sorry, the yellow lots and then that one commercial. So there is a house on that commercial lot there. And
That's
then-
currently a residence, so it
That's
makes
correct,
sense that,
yeah.
so some of this is, like you said, just bring it into conformance
Yeah.
with the law, but also with our plan for this area, but also to encourage continued residential and housing development in
Right.
this.
And
lot.
that's why our recommendation on the corner lot. So if you did everything and left 1701 commercial, then you would have the potential of a commercial use developing there that could be incompatible with those residential uses around it. And so it's our recommendation that you rezone everything that was requested by the original applicant and what the city expanded to provide that zoning protection of residential zoning for those houses on property.
That have just been built
Yeah.
there.
And
Okay,
that the original applicant wants to build a new house.
okay. I'm open to that.
So just one more question. So the ones on the bottom there, this is not, I mean, in the big picture, this doesn't seem like that big a thing, but I want to make sure we're treating people
Sure.
fairly here.
Yeah.
So the ones on the bottom that are the yellow code, which is R1 residential, and then you're saying that's an empty lot, the bottom, the first pink one there in the bottom, it's
It's got a house on it.
it's already got a
Yeah,
house.
everything on
To me,
the,
that fits
yeah,
there.
on-
Okay, going to the north side, the guy on the far top right wants his to say commercial.
correct.
Then you've got the next two the applicant, or there's the next two the applicant.
Okay.
Then the bottom, kind of the pink one and the red one. What's the story on those two?
Those are vacant.
Totally vacant. Okay. On one hand, I see what we're trying to do. On the other hand, I kind of want to respect the guy who owns the lot.
Yeah,
He's
and
not requesting any change.
I mean, if that's the decision of council, that's fine.
And it's just a home on 1701. It's just a home.
It's a vacant lot right now.
Oh, it's a vacant lot, and he wants it to stay commercial.
Right. He owns the commercial building behind it that faces out to here. He wants to leave that option open for either that to be commercial parking for the building on Marion or to potentially develop a small commercial.
So he owns that next lot on the,
Is parking not, could you use parking for commercial purposes in residential zoning?
You can, the requirements are more strict, you have to do more landscaping and buffering and setbacks. So even if it's changed, there is opportunity.
He could still use it as
That's right.
parking for his building.
Right.
He just wouldn't be able to do a new commercial building.
Correct.
Thanks.
All right, so our next request at 1500 Benton Avenue, this is a request to change a lot from R1B to R2. This is in South Waco. near the South Terrace Housing Authority housing development and the Casa Esmeralda apartments on Gurley. There's a little neighborhood in there that's made up of single family and some vacant lots. This area is called for medium density residential office flex. And then you see immediately in that area is R1B, but you do have multifamily zoning within a block of the property. They are requesting R2, which would allow for the development of duplexes. Right now it's just single family. Then here's the property. You can see the South Terrace complex down the road here, and then Casa Esmeralda apartment there. So there is other higher density uses in the immediate area. We did mail out 24 notices on this and had 0 return, and the Plan Commission recommended 6-0 to approve.
They did recommend approval.
Yes,
of
ma'am.
R2.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a house, a home next to the property in question?
They're not directly next to it. There are homes up and down that street, but next to it is a vacant lot.
But it could become a home later,
Correct.
because it would still be R1B.
Correct. Yes, ma'am. Um, 868 is a abandonment request for a portion of unbuilt alley in East Waco off of Dallas Street near Rusk. There is they're requesting to abandon half of it. The other half of it, they couldn't find any records of it being abandoned, but it is being used by the adjacent church. And so the property owner would like to abandon their half of it for development of their property. We do have a sewer line that runs down that alley, and so we'll need to retain the easement. No comments back on this, and Plan Commission. Another abandonment, we actually got a request from the applicant to continue this request to the December 6th meeting. They were not able to attend tonight. And then also we had a condition for an access easement with an adjacent property owner, and they wanted some more time to see if they could work that out with the adjacent owner. So we are recommending approval of continuing this case to the December 6th meeting. And then our final public hearing is a voluntary annexation at 5759 Bagby Avenue. This is a 2-acre property out on Bagby in the industrial district. There's just a little small donut hole, city limits all around it that was not annexed. They are wanting to build some commercial warehouse there and use city utilities, so they're requesting annexation and M2 zoning for the property. And Plan Commission has recommended approval of that.
Brief question for City Attorney on, given our smaller numbers here tonight on council, what does it take for us? Do we need 3 votes or 4 votes to approve a public hearing motion?
You need 4 votes to approve anything on the agenda.
Thank you.
Whoa.
All right.
Thanks for that, Josh.
Thank you, Clint. Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Are there any requests for future agenda items? If not, we will recess the work session and reconvene regular session for executive session as read into the record by the city secretary at 5:16 p.m.
Real property, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.072, and Economic Development, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.078. Executive session will be held in meeting room B. We are now in executive session.